Okay, so this is spirituality part two. Um, so I'm going to sort of lay down a little bit of structure for this because after the first part, there's been some really, really good questions from within Chelsoff in the Facebook group. So I'm going to try to address those. There was also really, really good offering from Mike Todd with the with an account from ChatGPT. On what it thinks spirituality is, and actually it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So I'm going to sort of talk about that as well. So Eamon Lynn made a really good response, and I think in some sense I think it actually captures the essence of what I'm trying to say. And I hope Eamon doesn't mind me quoting. So he said awareness of. So I think this is what Eamon is saying spirituality is, and he said awareness of consciousness and the oneness of all, and living in tune with this as far as we can in this bioexistence. I think that's just brilliant. I mean, I think that summarises it sort of perfectly. And I think in some sense it almost doesn't matter sort of what your metaphysics are either. If you believe that if you're a physicalist and believe the universe is made of matter and physical processes and so on, you could still argue that I mean, even those guys would say, well, yeah, everything's kind of deeply interconnected, right? And there is this. Even a physicalist would probably agree, yeah, that you can only kind of have one reality, right? You can't have like little separate bits of reality. So there is this kind of sense of wholeness. Certainly, it works for idealist philosophers or conscious realists like Hoffman and so on, because we believe that consciousness is fundamental. So and there is a whole being of sort of consciousness, if you like, and we're kind of parts of that, right? And just as we've discussed elsewhere with things like near-death experiences, psychedelics, brain damage, all these different sort of conditions that can lead to the temporary dissolution of the human personality and some kind of acquaintance with the transcendent. I think this thing from Eamon just says, look, just being aware of the fact, or perhaps the being aware of the oneness of all things is enough. And and it's like I was saying in the previous talk that why have this distinction between kind of spiritual activities and non-spiritual? I mean, if we're in agreement that there's one being of which we're all a part, then everything is spiritual, right? So there's that. Harriet Walker mentioned something about Immanuel Kant. She mentioned that while she was researching the philosophy of religion, that he'd said something about God, and I know he did, and I will get to that at some point. I did study some Kant, but yeah, it's quite tricky. So I've read the Critique of Pure Reason with great difficulty. Right, so now I'm going to just plunge straight into some questions from Charissa. And what did she go for? So the first one was, what do you think is the nature of Mal? So for those uninitiated, Mal just stands for mind at large. So it's like I said in the first talk, mind at large of idealism is probably the equivalent of God in religion, right? She said, what do you think is the nature of mind at large, or universal consciousness, which some might refer to as God? Right, so what do I think is the nature of it? Okay, so, wow. What is the nature of Mal? That's a massive question, isn't it? Look, so I think that Mal has phenomenal consciousness, right? So, Kastrup says that it's kind of, I mean, it just goes about its business doing what nature does, because it is what it is, right? And so it's sort of, there is a kind of experience there, but there's no metacognition, so it doesn't know what it's doing, right? So you could say that the cosmic mind is just going about its business, and it's only dissociated entities like us that sort of have metacognition, apparently. I think that's the general run of it, right? So I don't know. I mean, I just think that there's probably cognition all the way up and down, and so for me, I mean, maybe it's a different brand of idealism or something, or maybe it has kind of leanings towards panpsychism. I don't know. I'm perfectly willing to to sort of have that conversation and say, well, why do I insist that there has to be this kind of, or why do I insist that everything has to be of a mental substance? Well, I think we've kind of been over that actually. Um, so anyway, we're getting a bit sort of technical about idealism stuff now. It's supposed to be about spirituality, isn't it? But for me, it's completely and utterly intertwined, because I think that the whole world are kind of talking about the same thing when they talk about the transcendent. So all of the religious movements are talking about the same thing. Again, there's probably some fineries around Buddhism that need to be explored, but generally speaking, I'd say all of the major religions are talking about the great other, um, the one, the whole, you know, and you know, and so it's just seems to be the one thing that, once you peel away the layers of complexity and paradigmatic thinking laid down by physicalism and so on, you get to this place where it's the most parsimonious explanation. There is consciousness, right? There is meaning. There is free will, right? Well, we could say, well, look, we can doubt our direct experience of the world, but these aren't just kind of hunches now. These are being propped up by empirical scientific discoveries, which are fringe discovery. Well, not fringe, but they're progressive. They're kind of at the frontiers of science, and so of course they're not going to be accepted. But I mean, I've just literally been just a few minutes ago been watching a Donald Hoffman video where he sat there talking to a mystic, and as Donald says, both sides in this kind of ongoing sort of disagreement, really. So both the churches, both spirituality and science have to make sacrifices. So science has to do away with this absolute nonsensical scientism where it just dismisses anything that doesn't fit into these models, that yes have proved very successful, but do not completely describe reality. Right? I mean, scientism is a form of religion. I mean, I would say that atheism is a form of religion. To sort of, to stand there and say with absolute certainty that there is no God is absolutely stupid. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to kind of hold back on this. It's just, there is no, I mean, they're pointing the finger at theists, pantheists, or idealists, or anybody that kind of disagrees with them, and saying that we're all crazy, right? Because we don't have any empirical verification for our assertions and so on. But well, now we're getting it. And even before we had that, rationalism was a thing, and rationalism can deliver insight and truth. So it does bother me that you've got both parties. So you've got kind of religion pointing the finger at science, saying, well, there's no meaning in what you're doing, and your science doesn't give us sort of ethics. It doesn't give us practice. It doesn't touch the transcendent. Well, now it is, right? Philosophy and science are touching the transcendent. They're peeling those layers away, or at least the beginning to. Right, and science needs to do away with its obstinacy and its intransigent stance on anything that's a bit woo. Because actually, you know what? All brand new science is woo. If anyone's read Thomas Kuhn's what was it, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, I mean that's an awesome book. It was written years and years ago. I think we studied it at university when I did philosophy, and it talks about the nature of these paradigms that change well, they affect or inform the language, the experiments, the concepts, the models, to the point where you kind of don't really know that you're in one. And well, anyway, it seems to me that the prevailing kind of norm in science is of some sort of form of scientism. Although that, as I keep on saying, that seems to be changing. So back to the spirituality stuff. I also wanted to just clarify that I made a sort of quite a negative remark about these guys that do clairvoyancy stuff, the kind of stage acts and stuff. And I really was just saying that I think that most of these guys probably are charlatans. I'm not saying that these I'm not saying that these acts aren't possible. Pretty unlikely, to be honest. I don't think the transcendent is as simple as people like to think it is. I don't think that sort of human identity persists in the way that we think it will beyond the death of these bodies. I don't think. I mean, in fact, I don't think it will persist at all. So there is still a death, ahead of us, to sort of face. Um, but the consciousness, as I said elsewhere, I think the consciousness that's been doing Matthew will continue on, doing something else, God knows what. But we can get some sort of insight into that, I think, through mystical experience, religious experience, and all of the major faiths have roots into these glimpses. So, Christian prayer and chanting, and Islamic dancing, and prayer, and Eastern meditation, and all these ways and means of kind of sort of unshackling ourselves of this kind of these human sorts of attachments, so we can kind of have a memory really of where we're from. And I mean, this is one of the things that are reported by people, hundreds, thousands of people doing NDEs and trips and so on and so forth, saying this feeling of kind of infinite love and going back to where they're from. Let's talk a little bit about. So what else have we got on the table? So I mean, I think I've said stuff about ghosts. I think that the apparitions and so on. People see stuff. I've talked about them probably being wraparound, sort of human wraparounds. Oh, I know. We were getting to Charissa's other questions. So I've got these here somewhere. Yeah. So the next one. So given this nature and the fact that we abide in. So had I actually even answered that question, the nature of Mal? So I'm saying, yeah, I mean, I think really, so Mal is kind of the sum total of all subjectivity in reality, right? And reality is just constituted out of subjectivities, right? Probably an infinite number. And I think when I use the term infinite, I just mean that I don't really comprehend the sort of volume of the kind of superstructure that I'm describing, or even the nature of it. So yeah, but I think that I mean, one of the kind of intuitive reasons I think it has metacognition is that I think nature itself is an expression of that, because nature shows that there is some kind of telos and there is some kind of plan. And Mike Levin's talked a lot lately about this kind of teleophobia in science, where they cannot accept that there's any agency anywhere except in sort of advanced creatures and so on. And that's been the kind of the fashion, that's been the norm for some time. But actually they're finding telos, or they're finding volition in basal cognition and so on. So it maybe the animists, as I said in the previous one, were right. So anyway, what's our relationship with Mal? That was a really good question from Charissa. I mean, I think that we're emergent sort of novel beings within this kind of sea of agency, and I believe that we're probably components within sort of meta agencies, in the same way that we are meta agencies with respect to cells within our body and also organs within our body. So take a single cell inside the kidney. That cell doesn't know that it's a kidney cell, probably. It just has certain behaviors with respect to its neighbors. Okay, it probably doesn't know about the overarching functionality of that kidney, right? So let's call that kidney a sort of like a meta agent with respect to one of the kidney cells. Well, the kidney as well, only has a certain range of sort of perceptual capabilities, sensations, cognition, and so on. It has local information, so it again does not know that it's part of a meta agent, if you like, and that meta agent is me, right? And there are other agents within my body, kidneys, heart, so on and so forth, all which have their own function and probably desires and so on and so forth. And they don't know that they're part of, so, and again, take an ant. It doesn't really know the overarching plan, but the ant's nest does, and that can be tested, right? There was this thing with termites, actually. Really, really interesting, where there was like a sort of termite tower, and I think a sort of sheet piece of metal or something was put to block the termites' progress. And so what they did, they crawled all the way around this metal sheet and continued building the tower upwards, right? Now the interesting part of this was that the tunnels were aligned perfectly on the other side of the sheet of metal, right? So even though those tunnels aren't going to work, because there's a piece of metal in the way and they're going to have to keep going around anyway, they still build them there. So how did they know that they were there? Why do they continue building that? So it suggests that there's this kind of internal, I don't know, sort of representation of the target morphology of the termite's nest, which is astonishing. So so again, there's just more and more sort of evidence within science. What is our relationship with this? So I think that yeah, I mean, obviously we're quite different from sort of the rest of life on this planet, but I don't think we're different from, but that different from it, right? Levin talks about these continuities. I mean, I think there are probably agencies, sort of meta agencies, that we are members of without realizing it. That's what I was talking about. So, what's our relationship with other alters? Well, we're all one, and so other alters are, they're literally the same thing as us. And by alters, Charissa means these dissociated alters. That's Bernardo Kastrup speak for kind of agents, really. And this an agent being something that has a sense of self and other, so it has a boundary. And there's information coming into me, and I'm putting information out there. So there's me and the world, and there are tons and tons and tons of other agents in that world. But the overarching kind of dance is a dance of the whole, right? So in the same way that all those tiny little leaves and creatures and stuff moving around on the tree, they're part of one local ecology. We're part, we're part of the ecology of the whole, right? As is everything. So there is, scaled kind of agencies going up beyond us as well, probably into things like sort of planetary systems, and so on and so forth. So this is where I think that we can start building bridges between philosophy, science, religion, and I think it's only when we can start doing that that we can build pointers that we can all share, right? Because at the moment, the pointers that we're using, they're pointers to the same thing, but they're so radically differently characterized and architected and argued and so on and so forth due to cultural differences, due to differences in technique and methodology. Philosophy's gone down certain spirals of utter kind of demand for logic and precision and so on and so forth, and lost its soul. Religions, perhaps, I don't want to be too sort of controversial here, but it's become quite institutionalized, business-like in places, in some areas, and so perhaps it's lost a bit of its soul, and it's lost its spirit of sort of discourse and debate and theology as well, and we seem to have got a bit too sort of dogmatic and stuck in the mud with certain things. And so, I think that it's possible. And I mean, I think if these three parties, philosophy, science, and mysticism, I'm going to say as a catch-all, if they can work together, then, nations can work together. And this is where I start sounding, kind of like a political idealist, some sort of hippie, really. And maybe I am, right? I mean, what I know is that philosophy brings the tools that ought to be able to solve any problem that faces us. And it's inclusive, and Chelsov's inclusive. So anyway, yeah. So what else have we got? So I think our role is to kind of just continue to assist with the development and provision of novelty. And you know what? It's almost, I think it's kind of for self-knowledge or amusement, right? And it's like Alan Watts says, man takes too seriously what the gods made for fun. And if it is the case that after this physical life ends, we continue on, we might just look back on this life as a little bit silly, and no matter how horrible it seems to us right now at the time, we get through this, and then move into this other thing, and it might just seem really, really daft. And that's where you get some really, really sort of interesting, quite unsettling questions of does that make war okay? If vast swathes of people are just hacked down and sent off into the next realm. I mean, is that kind of okay? I mean, obviously that's doesn't feel right at all, does it? Because war doesn't look at So that's where this other question of sort of spirituality comes in, and that's the sort of moral aspect of spirituality, and the a lot of the spiritual traditions, mystical traditions, talk about this sense of harmony and inner peace and connection with the universe and so on and so forth. Whereas I'm kind of, on the other hand, sort of saying, well, just everything is the cosmos. Nothing is more holy than anything else. which again seems appealing in some sense because that will certainly prevent the argument. Because we're always claiming things to be holier than other things. So we claim religious artifacts to be holy. We claim saints to be holy. We claim prophets to be holy, and so on. When it is possible. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right about this stuff. It's just a suggestion. Everything under the sun, or every creation of God or Mal or the cosmos, is equal, right? This is ultimately a democratic place. It may not look like it here on planet Earth, but you go down a few scales, and the sort of relevance of our meta operation just diminishes completely, and then you go up a scale, and ours, and that diminishes. So how relevant are a bunch of ants wandering around on the floor? Well, they are for me. I hate seeing them cruelly treated. I even told off my brother's son quite a few years ago once for stamping on them unnecessarily, and it got a bit controversial. But my point being is that we eat vegetation, we're consuming microorganisms all the time, sort of whole colonies of micro agency, right? And what do our sort of political and sort of religious struggles mean to them? Probably nothing at all. So we've just got to put things in a perspective sometimes, and I think we need to, obviously our traditions mean something, and they capture something that's obviously important to us, hence its survival through the ages. So we need to respect that, okay? And again, we need to look at the pointers within all of these different faith systems, scientific systems, technical systems, political systems, and just say, look, what is it we share here? Which pointers can we all say, right, okay, that's something we can work on together. So I mean, this is what spirituality is about, isn't it? It's kind of, you think about the human body, and a part of it starts going awry for whatever reason, and you get cells that don't play ball, and you get cancerous tumours and so on. That's kind of like a rogue agent within a broader system, isn't it? So I mean, ultimately, the desire of the body is to have all of its organs and processes and so on functioning in perfect alignment, right? That's kind of what it's trying to do. And I think that's what humanity is trying to do. We're trying to kind of slowly but surely sort of iron out our differences and come together. And I think that's what this is all about. So what else? Any other questions? What do you think about the beings of light that numerous people have experienced during NDEs? Wow, that's an awesome question, isn't it? I mean, it's I have the feeling that some of these standalone entities that people experience on DMT have real existence. That's another question, but we'll get into that. I think these things are probably real. It's a human wraparound of some entity that we can't comprehend, we can't sort of properly perceive with human perceptual faculties. But of course, NDEs, these people have got reduced brain activity, their heart may have stopped and all sorts of stuff, yet they're still perceiving things. Maybe these are some of those higher order entities that I spoke of. I don't know. I mean, that's it's kind of, this is I just don't know. But my feet, when people talk about angels, daimons, and so on and so forth, I think they're talking about the communications that are going on in some higher order being, right? And the funny thing is that I think that when science gets deep enough, and when religion gets deep enough, when philosophy gets deep enough, they'll all meet in some convergent concrescence, dare I say it, where they're all literally finally realizing they're all talking about the same thing. So what's the next thing? So yeah, maybe I think they're angels. I'm just going to say, yeah, I reckon they're probably angels of some sort. So if these beings actually exist, would that alter your perception of the responses provided earlier? I don't know. I don't quite understand that question. Sorry, Charissa. I think that's it in terms of answering those questions. In terms of strange phenomena, the paranormal, yeah, probably there. Again, it's the wraparounds. In terms of mysticism generally, what is it? I mean, I remember reading in, I think it was called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. I was a massive fan of Richard Dawkins when I was in my sort of, materialistic science phase where, complete atheist, rejected even my own mystical experiences, right? And he actually started talking about this thing called the God spot, right? And it's a region of the brain that sort of becomes activated during prayer. And I can't remember whether they talked about whether they'd identified genes for it or anything like that. But um, I mean, typical kind of physicalist account of stuff saying, look, there's actually a part of the brain that is responsible for your belief in God, and so that's another reason for me not to believe in God, because it's just, my body conning me, and sort of, it was something along the lines of, perhaps it helps communities bond and so on and so forth. So it's been selected in for us to believe in God. I just I just think that's freaking nonsense. I mean, there might be something in it. I mean, it's Richard Dawkins. He's not daft. But even if there is a region of the brain that becomes activated during religious experience, that's fine. Again, it's just the appearance of mentation as seen across a dissociated boundary. Okay, so I think the reason we have it is because it's there. There is a transcendent. There is a great other. There is a God, right? It is not the kind of the classic image of a bearded man in the sky casting lightning bolts and sort of doing sins and direct tactical miracles and things like that. I mean, when it comes to it's more. I mean, the whole thing. I just call it the whole. Since what Donald was saying, actually, I'm a bit of a fanboy, I know, but it really really works for me, because he said that he doesn't like, well, I mean, it's not what he likes or doesn't like, it's just what the mathematics are saying. These trace chains are showing that there isn't one entity, there is a whole, but it cannot be identified as or sort of characterized in that way. Um, So I think I might stop there. I think I might have to be a third part of this. I think I've waffled on. I've gone down too many kind of rabbit holes here. But yeah, I will continue with this. It's fun, and I hope this was of interest. Cheers, guys. Bye.